All right, well, welcome everybody. Like I said, my name is Bill Fanning. I am part of the team here at Talk, and really today's topic is just a discussion around some of the changes that we're navigating when it comes to diversity and some of the changes that we're seeing at a federal level and how that's migrating its way down towards all of the companies and different associations in learning organizations in the country. And I'll just give you an example of how this, because let me step back. A lot of times changes happen. And while I understand that they're happening, I understand the ramifications of them, sometimes they don't personally affect you. I think we're at a level where if you're for or against the changes, it's a personal opinion, but it does have the opportunity to affect us. And so a friend of mine last night, as a lot of you may know, I was in the military for a while, and a friend of mine sent me a memo that was public from West Point, which he and I both, still have some networking capability with. And last night, yesterday, West Point ended all of its student support groups. So all of the diversity groups, and there was about 14 of them, were ended abruptly with a quick, and if I'm not showing it, but I do have the memo and it is public, but so you could probably Google it and find it, but they shut everything down. It's not allowed to be on campus. No federal resources are allowed to support them. So even informally, they cannot continue. And the area that really disappointed me was they also shut down the historical site for women in the Army, historically their service. So that website was also taken down, which was, I don't think, a positive thing because I really find that history fascinating. And so it kind of led me towards this discussion even more. And my goal was just to talk a little bit about how we are seeing that, or if we are yet seeing it and making its way into our world. So that's kind of the stage for today, and just a little bit of personal connectivity to how it can potentially affect us at a local level. Just a couple things. We do have some great events coming up. Just to stay focused on Talk for a second. And this just came together in the last 24 hours. We have a dinner in Atlanta, if anyone is in that area, on February 27th. It's with Data People and their CEO. And then we have another event that is being here in the Boston area with Pillar HR and their CEO, Mark Simpson, on February 27th as well. The Boston event is within the Talk events, and you can sign up for it. By the end of today, the Atlanta event will be in there as well, and you can sign up for that. And you'll see more information coming out in our newsletters about it. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention as we get closer to it, there's one of the larger trade shows that takes place in the Wynn Hotel in Las Vegas, and March 16th to the 19th. It's called Transform, and we will be there. We're one of the supporting vendors. So if anyone is going to that, love to connect, and just wanted to share that with everybody. So that was my thought on diversity. It was interesting. I was doing some research last night. Michelle, that is a great question. How do we get events in our area? So there's two types of events: sponsored and just talk events. And the events that are coming together are sponsored, but I would be absolutely delighted to coordinate with somebody in the Philadelphia area who's part of the Talk community, and we could definitely put an event together. It could just be coffee, it could be a happy hour, but I think that would be great. So if that's something, Michelle, you'd like to help with, you can reach out to me after the webinar. Nothing would make me happier to start putting more local events together across the country. Definitely follow up with me afterwards. So I did a little bit of research on kind of the changes in diversity that we're seeing in the news. And this is what I found. So here are the organizations at a very corporate level that have disbanded or dismantled their diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. So I tried to break it down into technology companies, retailers, manufacturers, and then some interesting notes where it's been disbanded. The Smithsonian was one that I did not expect to see that came up in some of the research I was doing that I was very surprised by. So at a very high level, national brand name organizations that are dismantling this effort, obviously there's a trickle down effect from that. 1 in 8 companies plan to eliminate or reduce their DE&I programs in 2025. Many companies have stopped participating in the Human Rights Campaign Corporate Index. Some organizations are rebranding DE&I initiatives under different names to better align with the guidelines. And I believe that might be mostly federal contractors that are falling under OFCCP guidelines or things like that. And there is a sizable shift towards focusing on merit-based practices and broadening eligibility for the diversity initiative. So that is surprising to me. And then I got to see firsthand, what that can mean at a college level when the support groups that are put together to help people with common backgrounds communicate, network with each other, and help each other get dismantled as well. And I can only imagine the impact that would have. College is stressful. Military college just has a pinch of extra stress sometimes, and having common people around you definitely helps you get through that. So that was surprising to me. So that was really what I wanted to set the stage for. I had a couple questions put together, and my first question, and I shared with you my answer already. Have any of you started to see some of the changes in diversity come down into your corporate hiring practices of your company? So definitely, companies are definitely making changes. I was curious across the folks who are attending today, is that something you guys are seeing at a personal level? I'm going to take the quiet as a good answer that not necessarily. So definitely appreciate that. The other part that stuck out to me in this, which seems challenging. So I was wondering if anyone here was adopting it. Jackie, thank you. Many organizations are denouncing this is happening in the States. Yeah. Alyssa, that is great to hear that you're advocating for it and putting recruiters through that diversity training. I might also advocate to see hiring managers and employee resource groups coming together to help people with those diverse backgrounds, because it's certainly great to have that commonality when you're doing that. And Jackie, I have friends as well who the entire diversity organization within the federal government has been completely disbanded, but there's more and more people who are feeling the change in their lives personally. When we think about merit-based, so going to that fourth data point that I was reading about, and by the way, I have all the data. If anyone wants the sources of all this data, I have it all. I just didn't put it in here, but I have a bunch of reference points of where I found all this. But one of the things I was thinking about, because it was talking about the challenge of moving toward merit-based practices. And I'm wondering if anyone is doing that or has considered that, and how that might be being brought into your processes of your company. Because it's an interesting and at some level probably a very fair way to think about it, but the implementation and execution of it seems to be a little bit of a challenge to me personally. So I was curious if anyone else had seen or felt that. And on a side note, Rachel, that is a very accurate statement that I didn't realize as well, that 50% of the Smithsonian is funded by the U.S. government. I thought I knew they had government funding, but I didn't realize it was at the level that you just mentioned.
And don't be afraid to come on the mic and shout it out. I talk to Bill all the time. I'm sick of hearing his voice. Let's hear somebody else.
Jackie, great comment that these companies are not free DEI like they said they were. Um, it definitely seems uh, it definitely seems interesting to me when people who have put such effort into a program immediately disband it, that maybe the intention behind it was a little bit more marketing than actual application. Um, but uh, but I have seen a number of articles and things come out kind of referencing what different employers are doing in this area. So that's a great perspective. Um, has anyone, here's another aspect that's really interesting to me. And this is something that I'm really curious about. Has this come across in any of in the last 60, 90 days in any of the candidate interactions you're having? Has this changed or influenced at all the discussions or the way candidates are approaching jobs?
Hi, Bill. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we sure can.
Hi. I guess I'll get on. Sorry, I'm all over the place. I was trying to have my lunch as well. I have not had any interactions with candidates that have, referenced what they're currently seeing with some of the policies that are coming out or attempting to come out. But as far as, I guess, going back to your kind of original statement around the merit-based process or hiring process, and, I've worked with a number of different organizations and even ones that have more, DEI initiatives or more, I guess, like diverse practices in place. Merit's never not been a part of, or skill set, right, isn't not a part of that conversation, right? It's just us trying to widen the scope of who we're bringing in. It's just I'm trying to understand, like, what is merit based? Like, what does that mean? Because I don't know of many organizations that wouldn't be taking that into consideration. Like, we're going through our, internal merit process right now. And, there might be certain talks right around some different diverse groups, but not necessarily, omitting or, moving people because of, right, where none of that should be happening on, like any level to an extent. So I'm really trying to understand, like, what is that? What, I know what they're trying to signal, but like, how do you actually implement something that in theory is already happening?
And that, Ebony, that's exactly one of the things I was thinking is, they talk about a transition to merit-based evaluation of people, and isn't that what it's always been? And I've, even from the military, it was a very merit-based way of evaluating and looking at people for a couple of things. One, for promotion, two, for training requirements, and three, for maybe individual help that an individual soldier may need, or somebody on a sales team. Like, I always used to look at my sales teams, marketing or recruiting teams, in the same way, and just look at the capabilities of a person, their merit, but not for a penalization way, but just for a guide of how to best invest in the growth of the people on my team. And when I understand where people are struggling as a team level or at an individual level, it then gives me guidance on how to add value so we can be better at what we're doing. And it's really surprising to me that is presented as a new idea, which seems challenging to me because it's something that we've always thought. And Alyssa, you made a great point that it's merit process for performance reviews and pay increases are a very key thing. How that becomes, and that's why I specifically asked a question of how merit becomes part of that process, because Ebony, to your point, it's been there. So, Rachel, you have your hand raised. I wanted to give you an opportunity. But
Still muted, sorry.
There you go.
Gotta love technology. I will say thank you for this. This is really great. And I will say loved everything that Ebony said because it's very similar for us. I will say we are a global health organization that does have some USAID funding, and like we are kind of very much connected to a lot of the things that are happening right now. So I will say I don't get as many candidates asking about the DEI piece as I get asking about like the stability of the organization in terms of potential funding and all of those pieces. But I think they're really deeply connected in kind of the fears that candidates are coming into job interviews and kind of just the overall industry with in my particular experience. And then I will say on our end, yeah, like the whole concept of like no DEI and just switching to merit-based, I'm like, but it's for us, it's been competency based this whole time. Like our entire recruitment philosophy and all of the systems and the processes that we have is what we call competency based, which is, you know, merit based recruiting. So for us, it's more so like, how do we then shift the language in a way that continues to lean in and emphasize that maybe like doesn't use the words DEI in the same exact way, but like we're still describing the same exact thing that we're doing. Nothing about that is really changing because it is merit based. It is competency based. It's more like, how are we going to start talking about it in a way that feels like it's, I guess, more accepted or more understood as to what it really is.
No, I think that's a great point. And that was actually one of my questions that I was thinking of that we could discuss is how are these changes potentially impacting your employer brand? How are you going to talk about your inclusive strategies going forward now that some of these changes have happened? So you can present the right message you want to the people you want to come join your organization. And I think you definitely hit an area that requires a lot of thought, because I think it's independent of what's happening from a process or policy standpoint. I think when you look at candidates across the market, being respected for who they are and what they can do, the diverse aspect of the person and the merit of their skills combined is something people really want to be recognized for. So it's how you message that is really important. And Alyssa, you made a great observation around AI and how that would interfere with the merit-based hiring process. I've had the fortunate experience to work for a couple AI platforms. And when we focused on merit from the statistical data that the organization had, we found that data was skewed because it was focused on historically the groups that had performed at a high level. And sometimes those were very offset groups in terms of the makeup of who they are. It can be geographical reference. It definitely can affect racial, ethnic, and bias implications. It can look at collegiate schools that somebody had gone to. It could also look at hiring manager preferences, who they've hired or who the company has hired over time. And based on that, looking at that data, the AI engine then makes quick determination of what is a merit that they should focus on. And it could be things that, again, come back to historical data rather than, critical thinking. So, hey, we hired a bunch of people from Clemson on our engineering department. They all did awesome. So the AI engine can then go, okay, well, we should find people from that university and rank them higher, and not necessarily see that as a proper way to do it. So your comment about deep screening is really interesting. It also comes back to the technology you're using and their approach to mitigate this type of risk that can happen by skewing decisions based on historical data. It also comes down to the difference, I think personally, between what an assistive AI engine is versus a selective AI engine. So an assistive engine assists you and make decisions by ranking things and showing you and allowing you to do the final decision making, where the selective can rule resumes in or out and present them to you based on this data. So it's important to have some of those things really thought through. To go back to a comment Rachel shared with us, how do you think we should approach employer branding and diversity or inclusive messaging as we move forward into 2025 to make make it clear to the folks who may come to work with us our stance in how we welcome and celebrate people. Has anyone thought about that, or is that something that anyone is working potentially with the marketing team or internally with the TA team to put some thought behind?
I have a comment. It's not me, but my wife's company, and I'm curious if anybody else is running into this. My wife leads, communications at a public company, and I would say that they are one of the most. I'm not going to name the company, but they're one of the most progressive companies, I would say, in the country, and they're always sort of the champion of anything progressive. And they're constantly testifying before Congress, and they try to influence policy. And I think the prevailing thought at their company right now is that they're greatly affected by tariffs and trying to figure out how to conform to these new regulations that have zero guidance, and everyone that uses their platform is kind of panicking. And the thought is that they do not want to be a target of the current administration, and that the current administration has already shown very quickly that they're willing to punish people that have gone against them, whether it's FBI agents that worked on January 6th or this or that, and they want to fly as low under the radar as possible. So this company that for 20 years has been the biggest champion of diversity and and anything progressive is almost cowering in the corner because they're afraid to become a target of who knows what the next thing is going to be from the administration, where they just don't want to be the in the spotlight. And so this is a battle that they've been willing to fight for very long, and they're kind of taking a back seat. And from an employer branding standpoint, it's they can't, wave the flag anymore and say, hey, we're this amazingly diverse organization, because they just don't even want to raise their profile. And I think that's it's a shame. But I'm curious if anybody else is having those same conversations behind closed doors,
Hi, Norman. Sorry about that, Bill.
Oh, that's okay. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I think a lot of organizations are operating in that same regard as your wife's. Whether we like it or not, it's real. And at some point, you do have to take into consideration your staff, because it impacts their livelihoods. In a matter of 2 weeks, 50,000 people plus are out of work. And that's that's a reality to a lot of people, whether we like it or not. I honestly can't say that I would leave my organization because of the decision that they've made to kind of scale back, at least externally, their brand, their communications, in response to what has taken place. There's a lot of responsibility that goes within that decision making. And I think we all have to be accountable for that. And we have to recognize that, without just kind of sweeping it under the rug or laying down and getting run over, you do have to take precautions to it. And so those are the conversations that are taking place, at least within our organization and others like it. Some industries aren't impacted the way this foreign service industry has been, any type of contractors or grant recipients. But I think we need to be mindful and thoughtful and considerate in how we speak about these circumstances, because it's not just about a brand. We're talking about people's lives and their livelihoods. So that's just my take on it.
No, I think that's a great perspective, and I do think. So I have a background in OFCCP compliance, and so all of those organizations are looked at by the federal government because they're doing business with the federal government. So the ramifications, even though they may not be funded, they're working in government contracts. I'm sure there's a lot of people having those dialogues internally, and maybe the term cowering may not apply to all of them, but compliance certainly would be something I would be thinking about to make sure that I'm not disrupting my ability to employ my staff. and the branding and the messaging and everything we do is a big part of that. One area that I wanted to talk a little bit about as well, I kind of think of it about balancing compliance with inclusivity. And one of the areas that I personally saw bias kind of come about, and I'm going to say it's unconscious bias, is in the hiring process with hiring managers and people's perspectives and things of that nature. And I'll give you an example. And this is an example I used to use when I was working to train people that reported to me to have a more inclusive thought process. If I was looking to fill a role and there were two resumes in front of me, one of them served in the military and one of them didn't. And again, this is personal for me. My brain would unconsciously put more value on the veteran than the non-veteran. That's just how my brain. So when I think about how I'm going to be more inclusive, it's taking that factor out and considering them equally. And so that's my personal example. But I'm curious, without the traditional, and Alyssa, I think you mentioned that you're providing the training for your managers, which is awesome. But that is one of the things that I've thought about as we go down these processes, the ramifications of breaking down processes or letting unconscious bias creep back into to influence things. Is that and Alyssa's already kind of given me some perspective on it. But is anyone else working to make sure that their inclusive thinking and evaluation process is staying intact?
Bill, we're continuing to do that. We are continuing on with a lot of our inclusive trainings that we have lined up to ensure that we do remain compliant with our own internal policies as far as inclusion is concerned, and interviewing with that unconscious bias mindset. But I mean, the reality is people are always going to go in with a conscious bias. I think the damage that has been done with these executive orders is that it sort of gives people the red light to do so. And so in response to that, we have definitely moved forward with our DEI trainings and our initiatives and things of that nature. And, really putting the spotlight on unconscious bias training specifically.
Yeah, I think that that's really important to focus on, especially an area for me, just because it's part of my daily family existence, is invisible disabilities or people who are not necessarily visually when you look at them, but definitely can fall under some of that unconscious bias or have simple things like extremely introverted people, or people who don't like certain types of meetings or how they function. Creating an environment, an inclusive environment for folks like that is really important. So I definitely, I'm glad you're continuing with that training. And hang on one sec. My dog got the door open. Okay, smart dog. So some great comments. And Michelle's mentioned that it's hard because sometimes more emphasis on a candidate who are out of a job versus hold a job. I think a score sheet, that was one of my questions upcoming, was some of the ways we measure and monitor how we're doing. So your score sheet is a great example, but I 100% agree with you. It's extremely difficult. And Rachel emphasizing the training is important. So that's good. Does anyone use SHRM's BEAM framework as part of their process? I'm not an expert in any way, shape, or form, but as I was reading some things, I had read that the BEAM framework kind of was a process that had helped a lot of organizations kind of keep things in the right place. So I didn't know if anyone else, as we all probably familiar with SHRM and potentially members, is anyone's taking advantage of that process?
What is that process, Bill? And do you have an example of it?
I can. It's a framework for inclusion, and the concept is that it helps organizations align merit with inclusivity. I tell you what I will do. I'm going to drop into chat in here. Probably the same article Michelle just shared, but it's a interesting model that SHRM has come up with to help organizations balance inclusivity and merit. So go back to answer that question of how do you, as Ebony mentioned, it's always been there. So it's like, how do you rebalance the deck to make sure that you're doing it? So this is one that came out. I think it's fairly new. And so, or it's being repurposed and being brought forward because of this challenge. So I just didn't know if anyone else was taking advantage of it. The most I know is what I've read online. And I'm guessing that since it's new, maybe not. So it could be something very interesting to delve in and learn more about. Certainly an area that I wanted to know more about it. I'm curious. So I obviously put together a list of questions, and I just wanted to make sure, is there anything or any areas in this kind of unique change we're going through that that anyone else had questions or wanted to talk about with the group?
Bill, I like not necessarily like it, but I recognize the point on your first slide that talked about, I guess, kind of changing up some of the language that's being used. I'd be interested in knowing, what are some of the equivalencies that people are using, as opposed to DEI or diversity and inclusion. What's some of the language that people are starting to use now?
Is anyone on the call had any experience or put some thought behind that?
I think one of the things that I am talking about a lot when I'm talking about recruiting now is like fairness for all. Like, again, it feels so similar to inclusion, but like fairness for all is really a focus that I'm kind of changing the inclusion word from. And I think as a larger organization, we're still trying to figure out so much of that because, like, again, my organization is a health organization, and a lot of our work has to do with health equity and like disparities in health, and like how do we start talking about that when that's a challenge. So I will say, like, I don't know that we've necessarily figured out that piece of it just yet, but for me, when it comes to recruitment and I'm thinking about like that aspect of it, like the thing that just keeps coming up for me is like fairness for all.
Yeah, I think that is a great way to think about redefining fairness. I think the other thing that's interesting to me is maybe broadening the definition of what merit is. So I think we all have this definition that historically has been there, but maybe merit can be a broader, inclusive term that puts weight on things that allow us to have a more inclusive view of the candidates coming in. The other thing that I was thinking of is the sources we recruit from. So if we have a fairness for all message, which I think is the right thing to do and powerful, maybe it's broadening the spectrum of who we share that message with. So we have an opportunity to have a broader, more inclusive outreach to a number of ways to connect with potential applicants or candidates. I know that for me, coming from a diversity background, that was always something that I worked for and talked to my employer or other employers about was, it's not necessarily just the tone and the tenor of the message you're putting out there, but it's putting it in a place that the diverse communities that you want to bring into your organization can find it and take action. And that's important.
Would you apply that also to the EEO statements, like on job descriptions? How I'm curious to know if anyone has had discussions around whether they should pull that from their job descriptions or if they should revise that statement, because that is also very much about inclusivity and could be seen as going against the federal orders, the executive orders.
Yeah, I will say we did that for ours. I will say our EEO statement also, again, as a global organization, we had actually expanded it significantly beyond specifically to the EEOC in the US, but that is something that we decided to do. And I think we're still trying to figure out how exactly we want to remessage it. It's so hard because our commitment to that hasn't changed. It's just if we have to figure out a different way to say it.
Yeah, I think Rachel, you landed on fairness for all is a great overarching kind of umbrella thought process to when you put that language together. But yeah, definitely. I know in past lives, EEO statements used to have demographic factors noted in them, things of that nature that I'm sure probably need to change with the times that we're in right now. So going back to, and I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but Michelle, you mentioned you were using a measurement tool to evaluate your diversity aspects. I'm wondering what other people are doing. That was always something that I was always fascinated by, is the way of measuring and fairly evaluating your diversity initiatives. And now that we're changing to a merit-based process, I was just curious, Michelle referenced she was using a spreadsheet to do it, but I'm curious if anyone else is using any tools or processes to kind of measure the effectiveness of being of fairness for all. And to show you I'm exercising fairness for all, my dogs came into my office and then my cat snuck in, and I'm letting her kind of claw my leg at the same time. I should restate that. My wife's cat snuck in and not my cat, and now is clawing my leg. So I'm being fair to both animals. And my dog came in because Norm started talking and he sounds just like my son. So my German Shepherd runs in every time he speaks. It almost instantly was hysterical. Well, I mean, I appreciate everyone's thought on this. I wanted to pose another question regarding technology. As we look at a lot of what's been brought to the market in terms of AI and some of the tools that are out there, diversity and fairness and inclusion has been a big part of that. Is there anyone using or planning on using or thinking about adopting any type of technologies, AI specifically, or anything in general, that is going to help with this approach to unity and fairness for all? And so, Rachel, building the dashboards out and being able to measure the data is really powerful. I sat through a recent webinar. I think it was done by Trent Cotton. I don't know if you guys know who he is. He's the head of talent for Hatchworks, super sharp guy. But he walked through some of his dashboards and very on point for measuring this type of stuff. Is anyone using AI or anything like that to help in this area? One area I was thinking about, yeah, Michelle, it's all manual. I can definitely appreciate that some days. But one area I was thinking about is some of the AI sourcing tools. And so going back to the concept of, instead of putting a diversity message out there and hoping people find it, but putting a message of fairness and unity out there, and also putting it in the place where a broader spectrum of people are going to find it or be sourced from. I think there's some AI tools out there that have a very broad data set of where they find potential applicants. And so that might be a great way. I'm not thinking of anyone in specific, but just more in general of how those sourcing tools can help us. But I don't know, is anyone using a sourcing tool that helps bring in a broad, diverse group of people?
We have not. We have done vendor calls just exploratory calls to get an idea of the platforms, but the cost, these platforms are very expensive. We're a smaller organization, a small nonprofit, and our budget just can't sustain it. So we have not moved forward with any of those tools. We do have ChatGPT and Copilot and things of that nature, and LinkedIn also has added an AI component to their recruiter framework. But yeah, the cost associated with some of those AI sourcing tools are pretty high. So we have not moved forward with them.
Michelle, that's great. I've never heard of Even Break, but Michelle just referenced that she partnered with a job board called Even Break that focuses on disabled candidates. I think that's a great example of a broader spectrum of people you're reaching out to. There's a lot of platforms like that in our industry that can help target a specific community or several specific communities. So I think that's awesome. And definitely a great way to connect with some like I said, a broader spectrum of people. Cool. Well, those were kind of the questions I had put together and wanted to talk about. I guess the final question I was thinking about in terms of this change, and it's going to stay in place for foreseeably 1,672 days or something like that, I think we have, of the current administration. Not that I'm counting. But I'm curious, how do you see this affecting the next couple of years of hiring? Like, not specifically for your company, but just your opinion. How do you think this is going to play out? I'm very curious. And to keep it not political, it just means specifically on the way and an approach to hiring and dealing with that inclusiveness and unity or belonging that we've talked about, making sure that we can still bring that forward, even though some of the political headwinds are kind of pushing against it.
I'll add something here.
Okay.
So our company has recently slowed down the hiring quite a bit due to the fact that there's a lot of unknowns across the globe. We're a global company and we handle standards around sustainability, AI, finance, IT. So we're constantly coming up with standards in that area and creating them. And the company does not really know how the government in the United States is going to kind of influence the creation of these standards and the companies that we work with. Quite a few of the companies that were mentioned on the quote unquote naughty list, in my opinion, are companies that we have created standards for. So it's definitely scary, and I think people feel uneasy about leaving their jobs, not making noise at their jobs. I think we're just going to see a shift in people staying put, or we're going to continue to see that of people staying put unless they have to, unless they're being forced to resign, and it'll be an employer's market still. But I just see a lot of fear out there, a lot of people just uneasy about everything. So I do hope that shifts, because I don't like the fact that people feel so uneasy. But that's just what we're seeing on our end.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I do think there's a lot of, and it's interesting because when I talk to people, I get and hear clearly that uneasiness. But then when I go and read statistical data around job changes for 2025, there's just this story being told about the boom of the economy and how many people are going to be looking for jobs. And that narrative doesn't line up with a lot of the personal feedback that I'm receiving from friends and people in the industry. So I think I'm in agreement with you, Michelle, that is definitely an area where I think there is some uneasiness. I will put a plug out there on a side note. I don't know if anyone, I'm sure you guys all know about this, but in a great way to find diverse applicants, there's a program called SkillsBridge. It's 180 days, up to 180 days. You can bring a veteran into your work that's transitioning out of the military. It's paid for today. Don't quote me on this, because some of the things are changing in a way I didn't anticipate. But it is their military pay is what covers them. So you can bring them in, train them for 90 to 120, up to 180 days. But it's a great way to come in and support that process. There's also another awesome group that I'm gonna butcher the name of because it just went in and out of my brain. But if you Google it, I'm sure you'll find it. It's also an employment service for the spouse of veterans. And one of the reasons I got out of the military was because of this issue, which is when you as a service member move base to base to base, your spouse has a hard time keeping a job. And, there's doctors and lawyers and a myriad of people that have a hard time building their career because of that transitionary nature of their life. And so there's another service, and I'll find the name. I'll remember 2 minutes after it's too late to tell you. But it's another great service for hiring. So those two are near and dear to my heart, but I'm sure there's a ton more out there, like Even Break. So, well, that is kind of the discussion I wanted to have, and I appreciate all of you making time to come and be part of it. It's probably not a one and done conversation. We'll probably revisit this topic over the next several months as we need to, or as changes come out and we have some more interesting ways to talk and adapt to these changes that are happening. Let's say it might be MSEP. I think Military Spouse Employment Program. I think you nailed it. Thank you for pulling that out. I'm very good at breaking down acronyms quickly. But I appreciate the feedback. The final thing that I wanted to end with is we are, through talk, hosting a conference in June in Scottsdale. It's called Talent Sphere. The goal is not to be our traditional conferences similar that we provide for going to Transform. This is more of a retreat for talent acquisition. It's going to create it's got a lot of wellness baked into the agenda. The goal is to focus on really great networking opportunities, an ability for us to appreciate wellness and get better. And the most important thing is that all the people on stage talking are practitioners, not vendors. The goal of this this conference, is for all of us to leave and be able to bring knowledge back to our day jobs the next day and implement things we may have learned at this conference. So that is the focus of it. There's information out on the website, the talk site. If anyone wants any more details, you feel free to shoot me a chat note. But I'm really excited about it because I'm trying. We got a lot of feedback last year from traditional conferences that were kind of like, "Hey, this is great, but I'm exhausted and I didn't learn anything." And so the goal was to turn that upside down, where you leave rejuvenated, better network, knowing more wonderful people, and learning some critical skills that you can apply to your day job. So, so that's it. I appreciate everybody very much, and everybody for sharing and participating in this. It was awesome. And we will continue this discussion throughout the year as we need to. So thanks, everybody. And I'm going to go shovel snow and hope all of you enjoy your 75-degree weather in Charlotte. And talk to you later.